نستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله اما بعد اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, before starting the khutbah today, I want to issue a very sincere apology. I am diabetic and I did something and ate something that I shouldn't have, and it's got me a little off kilter here a little bit. So I ask everyone to please indulge me. If you've heard me at any time before, you'll realize that this may not be the normal presentation, and I apologize to the Imam and to the community for coming before you in this particular state. Before beginning the khutbah, I would ask that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad who may be suffering, no matter what the cause of that suffering may be. We become aware almost every week of some part of the ummah that's experiencing a very intense occupation or torture or deprivation on so many different levels, that we become desensitized to the fact that so many of our brothers and sisters on a day-to-day basis are being deprived not just of their right and their ability to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that they would like to, but are even being deprived of the sustenance, the life-sustaining foods and other things that they need to survive. So today I want to start by reminding myself and remind you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us dua as the most powerful weapon that we can have. And that when we make dua for our brothers and sisters who are suffering, it's not just a hollow kind of gesture. It's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an acknowledgement that, oh Allah, I can't do anything with my hands, or there's not as much that I can do with my hands to change the conditions, but oh Allah, you control these conditions. And so let us remember our brothers and sisters in countries like in Nigeria, and particularly the girls in certain parts of Nigeria who, because of the actions of a particular group there, Boko Haram, will physically kidnap and take hundreds of young Muslim girls at a time, taking them, stripping away them from their families, stripping away from their communities. Let us remember our brothers, and particularly our young sisters, who are suffering from this kind of just inappropriate actions. Let us remember our brothers and sisters who, after the horrors of September 11, 2001, have suffered from a 2-decade-long impact, negative impact, on their personal and collective lives as a result of the actions of September the 11th. And we know that so many tens of thousands of Muslims have lost their lives in the war on terror that would seem to have been an ongoing war for decades. We know that so many Muslims were taken without any kind of evidence and placed in places like Guantanamo Bay, in secret sites all around the world. We know that even within our own homes, even within our own Muslim communities, that there's a kind of silent suffering going on. And so whether we know about the pain of our brothers and sisters or not, I ask on this day of Jummah that we remember our brothers and sisters who Allah knows their condition, but let us remember them and ask for relief from the suffering. Brothers and sisters, I'm not going to take much of your time. And I think it would be best if I kind of shorten the theme of the khutbah today. But I want to just share with you, as a reminder to myself and a reminder to you, about the mercy, something that you know much better than I, but the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each and every one of us by guiding us to this Sirat al-Mustaqim, guiding us to this path. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite wisdom puts into this deen a requirement that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every salah that we make for this guidance, as a reminder, and Allah will alam, but as a reminder that this path that we are on is not something that should be taken for granted. That every day that we are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the prescribed manner is a gift from our Lord. So whether or not we've been doing it from the time we were conscious of ourselves on earth, or whether or not you were like me, who became a Muslim, was guided to Islam at a later stage of my life, that every single day we're asking and reminding ourselves of the gift of being on this path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to each and every one of us. When we look at the history of Islam from the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we find that the mercy of guidance was something that was not just unique to a particular element within, a particular element within the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That this gift of hidayah, this gift of guidance, was beneficial for every person in every aspect, every level of the society, whether or not you were a rich merchant like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Uthman ibn Affan, whether or not you were a person that was part of the underbelly of the society, as we find many of the people of African descent who by their very nature of their birth were locked into a condition, a position in the Arabian society at the time of the revelation of Qur'an. No matter what station in life, individuals in this first Jamaat, this first movement to establish Islam, we find that it was a gift, it was a mercy. It was a liberation point for every person that was guided to this deen. Brothers and sisters, it is so much a reminder for me and a reminder for you when I look into the history of that first Islamic movement under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's so much of a reminder of how people, and I'll give other examples, but in particular, people of African descent who have been guided to this Islam, what we're talking about at the time of the Hijrah to Abyssinia, and those Christian Africans who embraced Islam and even made the Hijrah to Medina with Ja'far ibn Abu Talib. That whether or not we're talking about the Africans in West Africa in particular, who embraced Islam and established dynamic kingdoms of Islam, repositories like in Timbuktu, in this empire of Mali, who established repositories of Islamic knowledge that would benefit humanity all the way up to this day. Well, we're talking about those enslaved African Muslims who were forcibly ripped from the continent of Africa and forcibly deposited into the Western Hemisphere as enslaved people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted each and every person who was able to maintain their practice of Islam, regardless of the conditions and circumstances that they face. And then when we reflect upon these conditions, when we reflect upon those who were living on the Indian subcontinent, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had them in an environment where there were multiple, if not millions, of objects that were worshipped instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether we're talking about anywhere and any group of people on the face of the earth, this Islam has been a gift, and it's a gift. It is a mercy that we should appreciate, not just every time we make salah, but every minute and every moment of our lives. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has made it very clear to us that there, out of his mercy, that he has established different doors by which, if we fall into certain categories, we can enter Jannah through this door that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has specifically designated for those who have committed to this path and have died in a state of submission. And we have, from the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there were 8 doors that any believer can enter through these doors. And we have also in the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and one in particular, where a man had approached the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and had said to him about his desire to go to Jannah. What do I need to do in order to go to Jannah? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was reported to have responded, what have you saved up? And in that question, when will Qiyamah, when will be the day of judgment? I want to know so I can be prepared. I want to do something to be prepared to make it to Jannah if I'm alive during this time of Qiyamah. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was reported to have asked the man, what have you saved up for that time? What have you practically done in your life to save up for this moment that you're asking me about? And the man said that I don't make a lot of prayer. The supererogatory, the nawafil, I don't do a lot of that. I don't do a lot of fasting. I may do the minimum amount to be a Muslim. I don't do a lot of that fasting either. But what I do know that I do every day of my life is that I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was reported to have said that you will be with the people that you love. And that is a reminder to me and a reminder to you as we reflect upon these different doors of Jannah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make available to those who fit these categories. And the first one is this Bible Salah. That not just the brothers and sisters who are making the 5 that I'll get off from work, and then when I'm at a convenient moment and convenient space, I will stop to pray, and it may mean I have to make up 2 or 3 of my salah. But this door of salah, this gate of salah, is one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reserves for those who are carefully guarding their salah. That those who find pleasure, those who are not just going through it, but trying to get the most out of every sujood. Those who recognize that this is the most important connection that we have with our Lord if we want to stay on this Sirat al-Mustaqim. It begins right here with the salah. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said that there is a bab, there is a gate that is specially reserved for those from this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ who have had this kind of attention that they pay to salah. Then, of course, the bab al-jihad, that this will be a very special gate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reserves for those who are shaheed, those who have been martyred, fi sabilillah. Not those who are just talking a good game like I and so many others of us may do, that we talk about a preparedness, a willingness to sacrifice everything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted with this unique and very special reward of dying as a shaheed, dying fi sabilillah for a cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, and I'll speak this up, the gate, the portal, the entranceway, this Bab al-Sadaqah, those who find it within their hearts, they feel compelled to share with others that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made in abundance, not necessarily in abundance, but it put it in their hearts that if you are to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it relates to sadaqah, then you have to give sadaqah frequently. That it's not just an occasional practice, that it's something that you are recognized by, like the wife of the Prophet Muhammad Zainab, that of the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad in Medina, that even amongst the men, that Zainab had a special distinction, a special recognition that this is a Muslim that is known for her charitable deeds, that she would take her hands and create handicraft. And with these handicrafts, she would go out and sell them. And she was very skilled with her hands. And when she would go out and sell these, she would take the money and personally go into the neighborhood, into the communities, and distribute the proceeds from the sales of the things that she made. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designated a certain gate in paradise for those of us who can achieve this kind of status, this kind of recognition in this world. There's the gate and the portal for those who fast, not just the mandatory fast of Ramadan, but perhaps the fasting every Monday and Thursday, or even the fast that the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam conducted and did for most of his life, where it is said that the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam would fast every other day. And so we want to be able to just say and have within our practice not just the mandatory fasting, but having the capacity, having the willingness to deprive ourselves of halal food and drink for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a special gate for those. Brothers and sisters, there's a special portal, a special interest for the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu for those who perform Hajj and have their Hajj accepted. That is a sincere Hajj. It's not just, I've gone everywhere else in the world, so now why not go to Hajj? It's not that I'll wait until I get to an advanced age before I make Hajj, even though I have the finances to do it, but now when I'm capable physically, when I am capable and able financially, that these are the people who rush to make the Hajj and have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of their sincerity, and reward them for their Hajj. There's the gate, and I'm ending here in a second. There's the gate of those who forgive others, even though they may have the right to try to take some retribution for them. But they restrain themselves and they forgive those that have wronged them in some way. That there's a gate from those from this ummah who have this characteristic. There is a gate of Iman, a gate of sincere faith. For those who are not trying to mix their personal feelings and their personal inclinations with what are the requirements of this iman, this requirements of this faith. And then there are there's a gate that is reserved for those who sincerely dhikrullah, at every opportunity, even when they are talking and speaking, they are still worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so with all of these different gates that Allah has reserved for His sincere and committed servants, surely out of one of these 8, surely we can find it somewhere within our hearts, within our commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be worthy of traversing through one of these gates. In closing this part, Prophet Muhammad had made it clear that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, because of his practice of Islam, not just his words, but Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was one who will be given the option by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh, Abu Bakr, choose what gate you want to go through." Because your conduct in that world was such that you fulfill the requirements to go through any one of these gates. So you choose the one that you want to go through, and this is the one that you will be allowed to go through. That this is a unique distinction, this is a unique blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Brothers and sisters, this commitment to the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed and has gifted all of us with is one that we have full capacity and full ability to determine where we are on this path at the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes our soul and returns it to Him. That each and every day when we wake, when Allah gives us from returning our soul to our bodies for another day of life, we have this opportunity to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely. We have the opportunity to say, pick one of these gates that I want to, at the time of Qiyamah, that I want to go through, that I will do everything humanly possible, everything that I possibly can in this life to qualify for this mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we have to ask ourselves, what gate, what path are we going to commit ourselves to? We know that we're all Muslim. But now that we get past that and we have the recognition that we are Muslim, what path are we going to set ourselves on and continue on is very clear and obvious here at Masjid al-Tawheed. The kind of commitment that this Jamaat and its Imam Qasim has to Sadaqah, the kind of giving to the community, the kind like Zainab, let me go out and make something with my hands, and I don't have the money myself, but I'll find a way to make a way for others, even though I personally don't have it. And so it's clear, and Allahu Alam, but it's clear through actions. It's not what we say, it's clear in our actions. What are we committed to that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's within this framework called Islam, that falls within the guidelines of the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Each and every one of us has the opportunity to make this choice, to make this commitment. What am I committing myself to? I used to joke, and I still sometimes joke about with some of the brothers and sisters who are close to me that when I look at my shortcomings, that becoming shaheed, that martyrdom may be the only chance that I have to get into Jannah. That I feel like I'm this man who says that I don't have a lot of supererogatory salah that I have to say that this is a distinction that I pray Allah will accept and grant me Jannah. I can't say that it's about sadaqah. I can't say that it's about so many other things. But we all have, and you have many more opportunities. We all have the daily commitment to understand I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I am committed in whatever capacity that I'm in to do that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of us, our options are limited. I feel, and the older I get, I feel more and more this point that my options and others' options are limited. That I've gotten to the point, and others have gotten to the point in their lives where it's not at a point where you can add too many new tricks. You can add too many other things to your bag of what you do. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each and every one of us an opportunity to commit to what will make first us better, more committed Muslims, and what can we do to help others. That this is something that you don't have to have advanced degrees, you don't have to have titles, you don't have to have certain even kinds of experience to help others. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was asked, who are those who are most beneficial to the Muslims? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was reported to have said that those who are most beneficial to others, that on that particular instance, as we know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would craft his advice basically to the individual that he was speaking to. When a man came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and wanted to know, what can I do to become a better Muslim, a better believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ crafted his advice to that man, don't get angry. That this is a man who had a temper problem. He would get out of control when he got angry. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said to him, your path is to restrain your anger. Find ways to just don't explode in the way that you do. Each and every one of us, Allah guided us to this deen, put us on this Sirat al-Mustaqim, not so that we would end up being punished in Jahannam, but so that we can get the reward of Jannah. Jannatul Firdaus, even the highest level of paradise. We make that decision, what we are committed to every day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us on this earth. And so I have to ask you, as I ask myself, what path, what realistic, look at what we're doing every day and realistically figure out what are we doing that with the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be deserving of even consideration for the reward of Jannah. What am I doing as a husband within my house that I can say that I'm trying to be like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who said that he is the best amongst the believers in the way that he treats his wife, how he treats his family. He's the best. If you're a married Muslim man, you can strive, if for nothing else, to say that I'm going to be the best Muslim husband that I possibly can.